Hi everyone, welcome back to Hoopsa. In today's video we're going to be talking about the best value players you can pick for FPL 23-24. I'm going to say nice and early, there's no Trent, Salah, Haaland, obviously all picks that many of us are likely going to end up with, but this video is mainly going to be focusing on non-premium assets. If you like the video, make sure you subscribe and let me know what you think in the comments. And if you'd like to join the Hoopsa FPL League this season, then enter the code on the screen now. Right, starting with goalkeepers. First up, we've got Jordan Pickford at 4.5 million. Now, although Pickford wasn't in the top 3 for goalkeepers, he was in the top 3 for saves made in 22-23. He kept 8 clean sheets last season, and he's currently at 16% selection, and you can see why with the opening 6 fixtures that Everton have. I know Everton were a relegation-threatened team last season, but you have to think that Dyche is going to shore up their defence a bit more, and I think these are pretty good opening fixtures, so good value for a keeper pick. Our second goalkeeper choice is Fulham's Lino. He's also 4.5 million, and he was also in the top 3 for saves in 22-23. Like Pickford, he kept 8 clean sheets last season. He's currently at 10% selection, so a slightly less common pick so far. A couple of tough away fixtures at Arsenal and City in the opening 6 games, but the other 4 fixtures are looking good. Our final goalkeeper choice, of course, is Raya at 5 million. Raya obviously was the top goalkeeper last season in FPL. He had the joint highest points per match for a goalkeeper, tied with Alisson at 4.4. He kept 12 clean sheets and made 154 saves last season, which is leagues ahead any other keeper in FPL. The only thing putting me off slightly at the moment is we don't know where Raya will end up by the end of the window, but he still could be a good choice if he ends up at another Premier League club. United and Spurs have been linked heavily with him, and United in particular have very good opening fixtures. Moving on to defenders, firstly we have Botman at 4.5 million. I still can't believe Botman's this cheap. He was involved in 13 clean sheets in one of the best defences last season. He also made 2 assists and he had 35 starts, so he's a pretty nailed on player in that Newcastle defence. He's the cheapest Newcastle option, so if you're not keen on the 6.5 million for Trippier, then Botman's your man. It's a pretty tricky opening 3 fixtures, but Newcastle did start very well at the start of last season, and he could be a good option to have on your bench at that price. Our next defensive choice is Aston Villa's Alex Moreno. He's currently priced at 5 million, and despite the fact that he only joined Villa in the second half of last season, he kept 7 clean sheets and had 3 assists in 14 starts for Villa. Pretty decent opening fixtures for Villa as well. The only doubt at the moment is obviously he ended the season with a hamstring injury. You would expect him to be fit back for the start of the season, but one to keep an eye on during pre-season. Next up we have Brighton's Estupiñán, whose price at 5 million has stayed the same as 22-23. Estupiñán had 1 goal, 7 assists and 10 clean sheets in 30 starts for Brighton last season. And although he's got very high ownership currently at 51%, I think with Brighton's first 6 fixtures this is not a player you can afford to leave out. Next up we have Luke Shaw at 5.5 million. Shaw was part of 12 clean sheets last season. He scored 1 goal and made 4 assists. He made 30 starts last season, so injuries aside, he's definitely nailed on in that United backline. I really like the look of United's opening fixtures too, so I think Shaw's going to be a player that's going to be in my team in Game Week 1. Our last defensive choice in today's video is Andy Robertson at £6.5 million. I've gone for Robertson for his 8 assists in 29 starts last season. A lot of players in that Liverpool team underperformed last season, and I think Klopp's going to want to raise the standards next season. So hopefully we'll be seeing Robertson's returns increase as well. Chelsea, Newcastle and Villa could be tricky fixtures in that opening 6, but the main reason I picked Robertson is because he's a cheap attacking defensive alternative to Trent. Especially if you don't want to spend 8 million on Trent, but you do want some Liverpool coverage in your defence, then Robertson's the man to go to. Van Dijk is a little bit cheaper at £6 million, but for the most part you'd expect Robertson to have more attacking returns, so that's why I've gone for him. Moving into midfield, our first choice is Justin Kluivert of Bournemouth. So Kluivert's obviously new to the Premier League, having joined Bournemouth from Roma this summer. But he had some decent returns on loan at Valencia last season, scoring 6 goals in 26 appearances. Now Bournemouth have got some pretty tricky fixtures, but if you are looking to cut the value of your squad somewhere, then at 5 million I think Kluivert could be a good choice for that. At 6.5 million we have Eberechi Eze. Eze ended the 22-23 season with 159 points in FPL. He scored 10 goals in total with 5 assists, and 8 of those goal involvements came in the last 9 fixtures of the 22-23 season. Arsenal aside, I think Palace have got some pretty decent fixtures. A lot of Eze's goals have come against these sort of teams, so he could be a good inclusion at 6.5 million. Next up we have Mitoma, also 6.5 million, having risen up from 5.7 million at the end of last season. Mitoma ended the season with 7 goals and 9 assists, for a total of 138 points. I think the fixtures are looking good for Mitoma. I guess the only question mark at this point is whether Brighton and Mitoma are going to be able to recreate their form from last season. Mitoma definitely tapered off a little bit towards the end of the season. He had 1 goal and 3 assists in the last 12 fixtures. Not bad returns, but not quite the pace that he was running at earlier in the season. His ownership's going to be high, but I do think the value is there. Moving on, we have last season's second highest midfielder, Martin Odegaard. He ended the season with 15 goals and 8 assists in 37 starts. Surprisingly, his ownership's not looking too bad at the moment at 20%. I think a big part of this is because he's 8.5 million, but I still think that's a great price given the amount of goal involvements he has. Obviously there's a lot of Arsenal assets to consider, but I think Ødegaard is probably one of the few players that's absolutely nailed on in that midfield. And the other player I would imagine is nailed on in that midfield is Saka, also at 8.5 million. Saka himself had 14 goals and 12 assists in 37 appearances. His ownership is way higher at 49%, but I think with the opening fixtures that Arsenal have, it's well worth doubling up. Another player who had a brilliant season last season is Marcus Rashford. He's risen to 9 million from 7.2 million last season, but you can see why, because he scored 17 goals and had 7 assists. Given he ended up playing a lot of the season up front, he's basically a pretty cheap forward. Ownership's quite high at 39%, but I think United have got a really good run of fixtures to start the season. And our last midfield choice is Son, who also cost £9 million. He was 11.5 million last season. Now this is obviously because his returns were a bit lower than previous season. He scored 10 goals and had 6 assists. But when you look at his previous FPL seasons, the 2 seasons before he finished well over 200 points and was one of the highest midfielders. Now we don't know how that Spurs team's going to look, but we know that the manager likes to play attacking football, 4-3-3. There's also the chance of Kane leaving, so Son could find himself in an even more advanced primary position in that Spurs team. And I think at £9 million he offers a really good alternative to some of the more expensive midfielders, especially if you're looking to spend your money on players like Haaland and Trent, and you need some slightly cheaper options in midfield to make that happen. Those opening Spurs fixtures aren't looking bad at all, so he could be worth a punt. And lastly, moving on to our forwards. So my first choice is a little bit of a wild card. Luton Town's CARLTON Morris. He's starting the season at 5.5 million. Obviously he's never played in the Premier League before, but he scored 20 goals and had 7 assists in the Championship last season. He was Luton's top scorer last season. They haven't signed a forward just yet, so I think his place is pretty safe. Another cheap striker option who could offer some value is Nottingham Forest's Awoniyi. He scored 10 goals and had 1 assist in just 17 starts last season. And 6 of those goals came in the last 3 games, 2 against Chelsea and 1 against Arsenal. So although those first 6 fixtures aren't looking too great, he has scored against some top teams in the league. The biggest problem is going to be rotation with Johnson, but given he ended last season so well, there is a possibility that Johnson will be struggling for his place. And the final choice for this video is Ollie Watkins at 8 million. Watkins scored 15 goals and made 8 assists last season. He really pushed on once Emery came in January last season. The vast majority of his goals came in that second half. He also made 36 starts, and unless Villa bring a striker in, I think he will be #1 choice going into the start of the season. His goal involvements came against all kinds of teams last season, so I don't think the fixtures are anything to worry about. Thank you so much for watching, I hope you enjoyed the video. Was it useful? Are there any players that I've missed? Let me know in the comments below. At some point I'm planning to do a video on FPL assets you should avoid, so if there's any players you think I should include in that, then let me know as well. See you next time.